Hello everyone! My Nest Thermostat has been having battery problems, so today I'm going to replace that battery. Let's start by opening up my thermostat. This should have been a very quick and easy video, but thanks to an unforeseen accident, things got a lot more complicated. More on that in a bit. First things first, I'll remove the two screws on the backplate. Sorry about my hands being in the way. I'm working on getting a better setup, but for now I'm stuck with this. After removing the two screws, a gentle twist on the inner part of the backplate will set it loose. There's still a cable attached, so I have to be careful. Next, I'll remove the four inner screws. Once that's done, I'll be able to see the battery. This is where things get tricky. Normally, you'd see a little battery connector in there, but thanks to dropping it earlier, that connector broke free from the PCB, and I ended up having to solder my battery pack into place without it. That hack lasted me quite some time before the battery issues returned, and I finally decided it was time to actually replace the battery. You definitely shouldn't try doing what I did. It's dangerous soldering batteries, and honestly, it was not worth it in the long run. One thing I hate about this thermostat is that Google doesn't support replacing the battery, which means I had to buy a third-party one, and it was not as good. It also means that these thermostats are designed to be disposable, and given the warranty only covers 2 years, and my battery only lasted 4 years, with the last year being full of issues, that's very expensive to replace. Now once the screws are removed, I have to detach the ribbon cable with a light prying motion, and then you can see the full scope of my hack job. Let me get my helping hands and reposition. I'm using flux to help me desolder without bridging pads or shorting the battery. Notice I had to, very poorly, extend my battery wires to solder the original in. If I still had the connector attached, it'd be a much simpler job of just popping up the original battery connector, removing the original battery, and installing a new battery. Ah well. Once the old battery is removed, I'll clean up the pads with some flux and braided copper for wicking up solder, then it's time to move on to the new battery. Now, because I don't have a connector on the PCB, I've got to cut the connector off my battery, one wire at a time to prevent shorting. Then I'll tin the wires and get the battery into position to make it easier to solder down. This took me a while to figure out the best placement and use of helping hands. It's really hard to show just how tiny these pads are with this camera setup. I'll start by soldering the innermost wire, in this case red, then the middle, in this case white, then the outermost one, in this case black. Now with that done, I can flip the battery over onto the pad and then check the connections with my multimeter to ensure the pads aren't bridged and that I'm getting a voltage reading across the red and black wires in the range I'd expect. Everything's looking good, so it's time to close it up, and I'll just get repositioned again. Reassembly is pretty easy. I'll start by putting the screen back inside the ring, making sure to angle it so things line up flush. There's a little lip inside the ring that you have to angle around. Then I'll reattach the ribbon cable and line up the black plate, making sure I don't snag the battery. This took me a few tries to get things lined up, but ultimately I got there. Then I just screw in the 4 screws back in place before twisting in the back plate again. Remember, it has to be twisted slightly. Last but not least, I need to rescrew the 2 remaining screws into that back plate. Then to see if it's working, I'll plug in a USB cable and check if it powers on or gives me a charging indicator. And it does both. So thanks for watching and hope to see you in the next one. Future me here. Just wanted to mention I ultimately ended up replacing the thermostat after a couple of weeks because the third-party battery I bought ended up rupturing. So definitely don't do this, and if you do, use a real battery or just replace the whole thermostat, preferably with a different brand that makes it easy to swap batteries or that doesn't need them in the first place. Thanks again. See you in the next one.